On Wednesday the 3rd of September we had the final public consultation on Buxton's £100 million redevelopment of the Spring shopping centre. With that we had a lot of information and a lot of things that are practically finalised. So today I'm going to give you a full breakdown of what you expect when it's finally done. So starting from the very start, the site itself is here. The area surrounding and a small part of Buxton Spring shopping centre that the council owns. The site also includes the historic Winster Place just beside the Spring Centre. The development is run by Manchester property development company Capital Centric, a fairly new company but one that has quickly made a name for themselves, in a good way. They've done a fair amount of refurbs of older properties as well as new builds, specifically focusing on livability and sustainability with their builds, designed for the future, incorporates greenery and stays eco-friendly as can be. Their business model is around no sale of residential property, so they can rent out the units and the company has an invested interest to maintain and keep the buildings in good nick as their potential income is affected by that. And with that, I think it's time to look at the site, and to make it simple I'm going to split it up into two sections, roughly east and west, and we'll start with the east part of the site first. This is where the large car park behind Waitrose and the Springs High Street is now. The small car park just opposite G&T is going to be home to a small-scale apartment building, which looks like it could have a retail unit on the bottom floor. Unfortunately, it's one of the few buildings without any CG models, but it will take up most of the existing car park, and as you can tell from my overlay here, it does have a roof very reminiscent of the industrial buildings that once stood here with a few A-pitched rooftops. The site will possibly include a footpath beside the building following the embankment of the Y until it reaches New Y Street. Across the street now into the large car park is another apartment building that follows the curve of the current car park boundary and New Y Street. It's a mixed-use building again with 3 large commercial units below and a fairly large lobby for apartments which sit above. One specific that was asked about is cycle parking, which most of, if not all, apartment lobbies will include, as well as street furniture to park bikes. Now thankfully this building does have a CG, and it's this one that we've seen before, so the building highlighted here, that's the one we're talking about, clad in English stone on the bottom and with copper at the top. You can also make out the retail units at the bottom of the building, which there are colonnades around the first unit. A colonnade, in case you didn't know, is a covered walkway, like what the Crescent has. Now going off this CG, it makes sense to move on to the building closest to us, so this is where the current small car park is behind Milton's Tap and the old M&S building. This again is a mixed use with retail on the bottom floor labelled as a food market and apartments above. This building is almost entirely clad in copper. The architect, who is from Bakewell by the way, told us the decision to use copper was to reflect the history of the Dukes of Devonshire, of whom we can thank for a lot of our great buildings. The Dukes made their vast fortunes from copper, so I thought it was a rather clever nod to that. This building, as you can see on the CG, has a cantilever that stretches 3 metres over the walkway below to encourage outdoor seating even when the weather can be a bit, well, Buxton. The building also has a few balconies and again features industrial style pitch roofs, as you can see by another render the architect is holding. And I really like this render, it shows it to be copper a lot better than the last. I do really like the contrast it will have with the rest of Buxton. Anyway, also to note, my overlays that I'm using are based on floor plans and I've recorded from the architect just like this. Back to the previous CG and we can see the River Wye in the middle. Here it's had its retaining wall removed on one side where the disabled car parking spots currently are, and I'll come back to that much later. And it's been replaced by steps and greenery, also widened a few metres at the top. The greenery included by the river will be planted in reflection to local wildlife in our rivers such as crayfish and even otters to assist bringing the river back to life. And there'll be a pedestrian bridge built here with weathering steel railings around. The next 2 buildings are, as I can tell, identical seen here from the CG and stand here currently where the car park is. These buildings are connected together with a colonnade surrounding them and will have a retail unit in each one, with 3 apartments above, although they're more like actual houses with a shop below. As you can see from the CG, they're pretty house-like, and they seem to have a rooftop garden above those colonnades. However, it was said that these might be the only buildings they could exclude from the plan and replace with a public space instead, focused around possibly having an outdoor cinema in summer, that kind of thing. Personally, I quite like the house-style buildings, but we'll see when planning permission comes through. Moving on, only just visible in the CG here is an apartment building, built following the curve of Station Road. We have another one of those architect's new renders here for this building, and it's rather grand, with a large mansard roof akin to the town hall. And again, clad in stone. It's got some large dormers and balconies. Once again, I'm impressed. Only downside is that the people living here will have a view of McDonald's. And the last building on the east side of the site is another apartment building. Unfortunately, another one without CG or any render, but I expect this to be a similar design to the last one, may even just be a straight continuation of it, as it lies only just further up the road, separated by a pedestrian path that comes all the way from Y Street. That's the street where the old Hydro and Coffee One is now. And just a little breather before moving to the west side of the site and more new buildings. The pre-existing Waitrose and the shops on that side all won't be altered. Yes, there might be disruption during construction, but they will stay. Right then, carry on west, and following Station Road we have the townhouses seen just in the corner of this CG. There's 8 of these modern townhouses, which in a postmodern kind of way, they still have the Buxton basics with a bay window, a gable roof and a nice big dormer. These townhouses are built into another building that wraps around, being a mixed use. This will include one retail unit and apartments located around the back of the townhouses and above the retail unit. There's a courtyard where the building wraps around, with a plan for it to be filled with greenery, as well as above the building too. As seen on this CG, there is a plan to have a rooftop garden here. Stretching from this building all the way to the next one is another colonnade. Between the two buildings, the potential for that to be a green roof. The next building is really important for the town. It's the new home for the library and the museum. This one here on the render, and we'll get to that big thing in a bit. First of all, you can see that colonnade once again stretching along the front of the building, and you can see another nod to the site's past on the roof, with a pitched A roof mimicking the old railway sheds that used to be here and nearby. Big old windows, and it looks to be clad with wood at the top. And okay, yes, there's that tower. First of all, it needs to be there. That is the lift shaft to allow step-free access from the railway to the street below. As a result, it was decided that if there needs to be a tower there, why not allow you to walk to the top of it? In this render, it's 15 metres above Station Road. However, the architect was very honest and open and said it was likely to be softened and shortened before planning permission, which is good. The design isn't nonsensical as it looks. As the architect described, it's basically a deconstructed maypole. I get it sounds a bit odd, but back in the 1920s it was believed a maypole was set up on the fields here, and so the concept is the tower is the pole, the stairs around it are the garments wrapping around to the top, and right at the very top is a ribbon. Personally, I like the idea and the concept, but I agree a little shorter and a small redesign is needed. But that's what consultations are for. Now I want to go back and talk about this copper-clad building here. It's built along Station Approach, and yes, Conway's is due to be demolished, and along the back of the second station ruins, which will stay. It'll possibly include 3 commercial or office spaces, one of which is massive, spanning at least 2 floors from Station Approach to the new street level. I haven't seen a floor plan for the upper levels. I believe there are apartments above it, but it could also include or just be more office space. And atop, like on the other side of the street, is another rooftop garden. Another little detail I heard, although there's no images of this, is that there might be a fan window included on this building, which looked at the right angle will align exactly up where the old station window used to sit. Between what we've talked about is the street and the square, called Civic Square, with cascading steps, plenty of greenery and even a slide, all designed to look inviting and as little as a concrete nightmare like it is now. All the greenery that will be planted will be local and respecting and improving our greenscape across the town. Going down the steps, the roof of this section of the Springs will be removed, and that lift will drop you off basically where the old Currys Dixons used to be in the Springs. And a new entrance to the shopping centre will be built here, incorporated into the museum building, with a new retail unit stretching along from the old Pandora to the old mobile repair shop. As you might be able to work out just in the corner of this CG here. The Sacro Lounge building will stay, and across from that, the row of shops that include New Look and NatWest will be completely rebuilt into retail and with apartments above. Once again, this building has a large colonnade along the commercial units, and above that becomes a balcony gardens for residents. This building is similar to other large apartment buildings with a big mansard roof and dormers. And finally, the last building is Winster Place, which will have a comprehensive refurbishment for apartments above, and also improving the current shop fronts with new windows top to bottom of the building arches, removing the filler that it currently has. Now that's the overview of the buildings, but we're still not done. I haven't spoken about parking yet. So, parking spaces. There are two plans, both offer a similar amount to what are included now. And before you say, now there are people living here, they want to park their cars, yes, that is true. Not everybody who moves in here will have one, some will have none, some will have two, etc. But in Buxton, we are spoilt when it comes to parking, especially given the walkability and the public transport links we have in town. So I'm sure we will cope. I digress. The car park will be multi-storey, underneath the new development, where the current one is now, behind the Springs. I'll be unsure if it's ran by a company such as NCP, but I think it might be likely to stop antisocial behaviour, as the council is not good at preventing such things, with our only current multi-storey to the point where they have to close it at 6 o'clock. There is currently a final decision to be made to make the entrance as it is now on New Y Street, and spend a lot of money raising the buildings there to fit the cars underneath, or just to put a new entrance to the car park here, opposite McDonald's, and to have a traffic light controlled crossing. It was said that Derbyshire County Council have done simulations and the new crossing won't make major disruptions to current traffic, so if that's true, I'm in favour of that option. With that, disabled spots will be situated closest to the car park lift or access point, which looks to be in that copper-clad building above. A few final things to add from questions I've heard at the meeting. There is a likelihood a fair amount of new and existing pitched roofs can have solar panels installed, as well as heat pumps that could be implemented on site. The architect said that the civil engineer was excited at the prospect of using low carbon concrete across the development, and it's not public money. The council are only putting money into the site as a result of them maybe occupying those office spaces, or of course the museum and the library being included. The rest is private capital. And before I do our outro, I just want to leave you with this image. Obviously the buildings aren't going to be blue, but this shows you the full thing where all the buildings are on the site. And obviously you can go back in my video and you can see my overlay. You can see where that is currently with the car park beneath it, and you can pinpoint it and work it out together. I've tried to make it as easy as possible, but there's a lot to cover, and it's a lot harder when you don't have like a physical model that you can prod your fingers at. But hey ho. I think that is everything that there is to cover. Of course, if I've missed something, please let me know down below. If you've got any questions, any opinions, anything to do with the project whatsoever, please let me know. Thank you very much for watching. A huge thank you to all my supporters on Ko-fi, and until next time, ta-ra. That guy was probably staring at me through his car.